The 2024 presidential election map is as narrow as it ever has been. No more than 6 states are considered to be truly in play for either Biden or Trump this cycle, and there are 5 to 10 more secondary battlegrounds, so to speak, that may flip in a landslide scenario. On your screen right now are my current electoral college ratings based on a combination of factors, including polling, previous results, trends, and demographics. These ratings are based on probabilities rather than just pure margins. So, for example, the deepest shade of red or blue, the solid states, have a better than 99% chance of going to Biden or Trump. The next lightest shade, likely states, between 80 to 99%, lean between 70 to 80%, tilt between 60 to 70%, and then toss-up between 50 to 60%. And so as such, Trump holds a 262 to 226 electoral college vote advantage in the all-important race to 270. Neither candidate, as it stands right now on this map, would secure enough electoral votes to win the presidency, as there are 50 electoral votes currently rated as toss-ups. They come from the Rust Belt trio of Wisconsin, Michigan, and then Pennsylvania, and then the Silver State here out west, Nevada. Arizona and Georgia are the tilt states towards Trump. They tend to be grouped in with the 4 toss-ups as 2024's key battlegrounds. Like I said, though, these ratings are based on a combination of factors beyond just polling. But how would they look if we were to base these probabilities on the latest polling averages via FiveThirtyEight alone? Let's go through each of the states in which there are enough polls surveyed to have generated an average on their website. Let's start in Nevada. It was D+2 for Biden in 2020 and for Clinton in 2016. It has tended to lean left over the last 2 decades or so in statewide races, though there have been signs of growing Republican strength in recent cycles. Taking a look at the latest 2024 polling average from FiveThirtyEight, they have Trump leading Biden by 3%, with 42% to 39%, and then Robert F. Kennedy Jr. down at 9.2%. Now, it is important to note that RFK has qualified for the ballot in Nevada per his campaign, though it is very, very unlikely that he will seriously contest the state. He is much more likely to play spoiler, as whether he takes more votes from Biden or from Trump could make a significant difference with a margin as close as this. Now, a 3-point lead itself is right on the border of what would generally be considered the margin of error for an individual poll. But when looking at a polling average here, where a bunch of polls have been added together, I do tend to lower my own interpretation of the margin of error to around 2 to 2.5%. So going back to our electoral map here, I do think it's fair to shift Nevada from a toss-up into the tilt Republican category for Trump with a 3-point lead. And that lifts the former president up to 268 electoral votes now, just too shy of 270. He will need just one more state to hit the magic number in this scenario. Let's head over to Arizona first, though, a state that is already tilting in his direction here in my own ratings. The FiveThirtyEight average actually only shows Trump leading by 2.9 points here, very similar to Nevada, just a 1/10 of a percentage point closer, actually. So Arizona remains tilt Republican on our map. Arizona had for a long time been a reliably Republican state, as they won 13 of 14 presidential elections leading up to 2020, when Biden carried the state by 0.3%. It was the second closest margin in that election, and Democrats have also won the last 4 non-presidential statewide major contests for U.S. Senate and governor. This leftward trend here has been primarily driven by the rapid growth and diversification of Phoenix, Maricopa County, which had previously been much more favorable to Republicans, leading to their statewide dominance over the last 80-plus years. And a similar thing can actually be said in Georgia, where prior to 2020, Republicans had also been dominating the state in statewide elections. Biden only won by 0.2% 4 years ago. That was his narrowest margin in any state, and Democrats have followed that up with a string of 3 straight Senate wins as well. The demographics here have also trended to the left as the Atlanta metro region has grown and diversified, much like Phoenix, with an influx of racial minorities and college-educated white voters moving from the more liberal areas of the country. Yet again, though, as appears to be the case in Arizona as well, Trump's growing strength among Black and Hispanic voters has helped him maintain a consistent polling advantage here in 2024, as Trump's lead in Georgia is around 5 points right now, 4.8% to be exact. He has held this healthy lead for a few months now, with Biden yet to lead in a single individual poll up to this point. The overall 4.8-point lead, though, is closer to that of a lean Republican state rather than simply tilt. So here I'm going to shift it into that category as a result on our map as it joins North Carolina, which also happens to have actually a similar polling output right now at Trump plus 5.8, 44.3% to 38.5%. North Carolina is another state in which RFK Jr. has qualified, though again, it's much more of a spoiler thing here as he currently sits at just 8.4%. So going back to the map, North Carolina remains lean Republican here. It remains that way after it was Trump plus 3 in 2016 and then only Trump plus 1 in 2020, though the GOP has now won 7 consecutive federal contests here, each by less than 6%. Now, while we're here, let's also finish up the South, down here in Florida. I have assigned it a likely rating after Trump carried it by 3 points in 2020. It was one of just 5 states in which he did better than in 2016, and Republicans followed that up with landslide victories in the 2022 midterms. All signs point towards Trump carrying Florida by a larger margin than any other presidential candidate in modern history. His current lead, according to FiveThirtyEight, is 8.2%, 45.3% to 37.1%. He is led by as much or as high as 10 or 11 points in late May. Either way, Florida remains a likely Republican state here. Texas is also likely Republican here based on my own rating. With 40 electoral votes, it's the second largest prize on the map after California. Historically a reliably Republican state, it has become much more competitive over the last few decades due to recent demographic trends. Joe Biden received the highest percentage of the vote for a Democrat in 2020 since Jimmy Carter in 1976, which was the last time that Texas went blue. Still, though, Trump's 6-point margin victory was considered a strong performance for him, at least relatively speaking, as polls had suggested that he would win by no more than a point or 2. Now in 2024, though, the polls have shown him leading by a very strong margin. The latest average via FiveThirtyEight is Trump plus 11.1, inflated by the GOP's strength among Hispanic voters, which is a key voter bloc here in Texas. An 11-point lead is closer to that of a safe Republican margin, so we'll shift Texas into that category here instead. Up in the Midwest, both Iowa and Ohio are likely Republican after backing Trump by consistent 8 to 9 point leads in both 2016 and 2020. There is no average available yet in Iowa, but there is one in Ohio, Trump plus 9.3. These two states have voted very similarly in recent cycles, so it's reasonable to assume that if we had more polls in Iowa, Trump's lead would come in around a similar margin. Both stay likely. Up in Minnesota, a lean Democrat state, according to my own rating, both Minnesota and Virginia have been catching headlines here early on in this cycle as Trump has looked much more competitive than expected in the polls thus far, though it is important to note that they did vote for Biden by 7 and 10 points, respectively, just 4 years ago. So it would take a serious overperformance for the former president to beat the fundamentals here. The latest average in Minnesota, though, has Biden leading by just over 2.5 points, with 42.3% to 39.7%, and then Kennedy at 8.5%. RFK has qualified for the ballot in Minnesota, but regardless, this narrow advantage for Biden will translate over to just a tilt Democrat rating here, rather than lean Democrat. Unfortunately, we don't yet have an average available to us in Virginia, or New Hampshire, or Maine for that matter. So let's head to Wisconsin then, the first of the core Rust Belt trio here, along with Michigan and Pennsylvania. All three are rated as toss-ups after narrowly voting for Trump in 2016 and then Biden in 2020. Wisconsin has generally voted furthest to the right and Michigan furthest to the left, yet here in 2024 we have seen Biden consistently performing best in Wisconsin. He leads Trump here by 0.2%, according to 538, a remarkably narrow margin here. Trump did outperform the polls here in both 2016 and 2020, more so in Wisconsin than any other state actually, though it's not necessarily wise to assume that the same polling error will carry over from election to election. Right now, the only logical way to approach this race in Wisconsin is to assume that it's just a toss-up, 50-50, so it remains that way here. The same thing can actually be said over in Michigan and Pennsylvania. Biden also leads in Michigan per 538 by 0.4%. He won it by 3 points in 2020 as compared to just a point in Pennsylvania and less than a point in Wisconsin. And Democrats have performed very well here in down-ballot races over the last few cycles as well. As for the state of Pennsylvania, Trump maintains a narrow advantage in this state by just over half a point here, 42.6% to 42%. He has consistently led by a very, very narrow margin here in Pennsylvania since 538 debuted their average on the 1st of March. Still, though, this is just far too narrow to be anything but a toss-up here on our poll-based map. Now, the fact that all three of these Rust Belt states are toss-ups here on this map, according to the latest polling averages, is extremely significant, as considering that if Biden manages to win all three of these states, even by the narrowest of margins, he would hit 270 electoral votes exactly, and thereby secure a second term. Trump, meanwhile, would of course only need to just win one of them to surpass 270, a far simpler task. Remarkably, this is the exact same dynamic that we have seen in the previous two elections. Had Hillary Clinton held these three states in the Democratic corner in 2016, she would have defeated Trump. Yet had Trump held them against Biden in 2020, he would be serving a second term right now. All things considered, this means that the latest polling averages from 538 suggest that former President Donald Trump would be favored to win a non-consecutive term in the Oval, but he does still fall shy of the necessary 270 electoral votes with 268. Biden, meanwhile, trails further behind with 226, though he is just a sweep of the toss-ups away from 270. That's all for this analysis, though. You can feel free to comment your thoughts and feelings on this map in the comment section below. I appreciate all positive or negative comments. Also, make sure to let me know down there what other 2024 related videos you would like to see in the future. Shout out to my channel members on screen here. Thank you so much for your support. If you would like to become a member, go ahead and click the join button below this video to receive exclusive perks. Finally, be sure to check out electionpredictionsofficial.com for my latest 2024 forecast. You can support my channel by donating via the link to my PayPal in the comments below. Check out more content from my channel here. Make sure to subscribe and like the video if you did. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.